a surfer and you've been trying to take off backside on bigger boards, but you're finding it's impossibly difficult to get right to feel confident and smooth with it, or even if you're just noticing that you're a little bit slower on the backhand pop-up versus the forehand pop-up, and you're just looking for a solution on bigger boards, then there is one somewhat counterintuitive thing that you're probably doing that you can definitely get on top of. This is one of the game changers that I've seen transform so many surfers' progression and open up a different side to their surfing by freeing up more opportunity on their backhand, the same as their forehand. For any surfers, beginner to advanced, wondering what's going wrong with your backhand popper, you won't want to miss this one. And if you are new here, my name's Considine, and I'm a professional longboarder, a surf coach, and a physical therapist, or a physio, depending on where you're from. And I created a platform called longboardsessions.com to allow people to find the best in their surfing. And today I'm here to help you find the best in your surfing, no matter where you're at. And if you do find this video valuable today, then please feel free to subscribe, as well as check out longboardsessions.com. We have a full series of different pop-ups that we can use on longboards, from our beginner pop-ups all the way to our advanced tail pops. So it is a massive help, and we're here to help along the way. So feel free to check that out if that's something that you're interested in. At the end of this video, we're also going to go through a really important drill that you can complete both on land and in the water to improve this for your surfing. So let's get into it. Okay, so let's get started. In terms of the surfers that this will help, it's firstly going to be those surfers that are coming from the beginner stage into their intermediate stage of their surfing of longer boards, even some kind of foam boards this can apply to, and they're having a lot of trouble maneuvering the board and putting it exactly where they need to from the start of the wave. Now, the second type of surfer that this is going to help is that advanced surfer, but who's coming from surfing shorter boards. So they're very used to a very wide stance, and they're used to taking their shortboard techniques through to the longboard or through to the bigger board, which again can pose some difficulties. So now that we've talked through the types of surfers this can affect, I did want to go through the actual problems that we see people having and what we can help to fix with this technique that we'll talk about. So the first problem that we usually see people having with their backhand takeoffs on the bigger boards is firstly feeling like they're fairly locked in the hips. Now, the reason that we feel locked in the hips is because of our back foot position. We'll get through how to fix this as well as some other things soon, but that is going to be something that really limits our ability to rotate. And oftentimes, especially as we get older in our surfing, as our hip mobility might start to decrease, which is important to make sure you're still focusing on, we can find other ways to open ourselves up to allow for more rotation through the thoracic, through the hips, through the lumbar spine, which can really help to get ourselves facing where we want to be going, rather than what we typically see where people are kind of leading with their bottom and they're unable to kind of see where they're going and have good control over that. The second thing, and this is a big one, is getting caught too low on the wave. Now, the reason this is a problem is oftentimes one of the biggest problems that we see with our backhand popper is that we can't engage the tail early enough. So you might notice on your forehand, you seem to easily be able to pop up, and then we're able to engage the turn and make that happen. What happens with our backhand takeoffs is it takes a lot longer to engage the tail, to engage the turn. If this is our wave here, and say we're doing a backhand takeoff going right, so we're a goofy footer, such as myself, what happens is instead of being able to take off here and then go down the side of the wave, we actually wait longer to get that tail engaged, and so we actually take a longer arc and we get stuck down this bottom third of the wave, which we know is a really dangerous place to be. Quite often notice that the wave kind of crashes ahead of us and we get stuck in the white water, which isn't what we want. What we do want to be happening instead is making sure, I'll draw this again, making sure that we get a nice engagement of the tail early so that we can make our way across the wave as early as possible and not getting caught stuck down here doing that long arc because we can't engage that turn quickly enough. Now, the third problem that we see here is that we've actually got too much tail pressure. And this is a lot to do with the difference of placing weight on our toes when we're on the board versus placing weight on our heels. On our toes, we can be super subtle, but with our heels, as is more common with our backhand surfing, it's a little bit more all or nothing, which means that then we're going too slowly, so we stall too much. And the other thing that can happen here is we become off balance because we've disengaged so much rail that we just lose control altogether. And then lastly, we have very limited rotation. So Because of our position on the backhand, we know that our back is facing the wave. And so what we end up doing is this backhand takeoff actually promotes some pretty bad habits in the early phases of our surfing. What happens a lot of the time, especially in the beginner to intermediate stages of our surfing, is we don't rotate enough. And if we then translate that onto our backhand, is we don't rotate at all. We just let our back do the talking, and that does become a big problem as well. Okay, so these are the common problems that we often see. So let's get into the solution here for you now. Now, the solution is all going to be around the back foot position and how this is going to affect the hips, how this is going to affect that thoracic region so we can actually direct our chest where we want it to go. So the fix for this is actually going to be to pop up and engage the toes of the back foot. And specifically, this means that we're not going to place our heel on the board. You might be thinking that doesn't make a lot of sense. If our foot is angled across the board like so, then we only have our pressure on the toes. We're going to press too much onto one side of the rail. And this then comes into the next part of this, which is actually we're going to keep the hips and the back toe parallel with the stringer. And you can see that this is coming into a mini drop knee stance as well, like a drop knee turn. Now, the magic of what this actually does is instead of getting the back foot perpendicular to the stringer or across the stringer, this is what actually creates the locked up hip effect. And this is where we actually engage the heel, which we know creates too much pressure potentially on the tail. So we now know that we can use our toes on the back of the tail, which we know that we have a little bit more of an easier time filtering weight onto. And then we're also going to make sure that the hips and the back foot is parallel to the stringer, so it's not across the stringer and placing too much weight on one side. The other thing that you'll notice with the backhand takeoff, if we are using our heel and that back foot perpendicular to the stringer, is that it takes a long way for us to lean back to actually get the heel engaged. We can see from the start of the pop-up, what happens is the front foot is nice and flat and the back foot only has the toes engaged. Now, this is just simply because we've got a lengthened calf, and this means that the calf is too tight to put the heel down any further. This isn't necessarily a problem. This will happen for everyone. It's just biomechanically how we're made up as humans. But then as we move backwards, we can notice that the heel starts to push into the rail. And this is why it's such a big problem, because we have to put all of our weight or a lot of our weight onto the back foot to even get the tail engaged properly with the heel. Versus being able to use the toe, and we can softly filter weight onto that back foot appropriately, which is just a massive game changer. This mini drop knee is going to be really, really effective. It's not a big one where we've got a big wide stance and doing a big raid lead drop knee. And as we have the toe and hips parallel with the stringer now, we can see that this opens our chest up to the front of the board, and all of a sudden, because we're more forward facing, it starts to feel more natural. It starts to feel more like we're on our forehand, and we can actually see some really good rotation come into place because we're not so locked up in the hips. So in terms of how to put this into practice, let's give you a nice drill to work on. Now, if you are finding this somewhat helpful, then I did just want to really quickly mention that at longboardsessions.com, we have a full series dedicated to the different types of pop-ups that you can use, and we can help you discover which pop-ups you need to be using for this stage in your surfing, and then exactly what to do next. Has everything from the tail pop, the straight pop, and all the modified pop-ups, and it's been really, really useful for a lot of people. Put all my knowledge into that and helping people work through it week in and week out, which is a bunch of fun. So feel free to join myself as well as the other members if this does sound a little bit interesting. It's a bunch of fun. We all have a laugh together. Yeah, I'd love to help you out. So now let's get into our drill, and this is going to be a drill that actually starts at home, but then we can actually implement this in the water in our next session. All right, so we've got drill 1 here. This is going to be at home. And what this is designed to do is essentially to break us out of our habits. I find that a lot of what I do as a surf coach, as well as a physio, is we're trying to change people's automatic behaviors and habits and try to move them into a new pathway of how their brain is working and trying to complete a task. Oftentimes, we need something that breaks that cycle. Now, the cue that I'm going to give you here is to touch with the toes, and we're specifically talking about the toes of the back foot. Now, I like this as a cue because we've gone through the technique of how to do it, but this is something that we can feel. And I often say that we can understand theory, but until we feel it, we can't learn it. What we need to do is I want you to give this a go in the backyard on a board with no fin in it. Don't want your board to get damaged. But we're going to be doing that tail pop to the back of the tail, and we're going to be trying to land the back foot parallel with the stringer, and we're going to feel the toes touching. We want to avoid the heel touching at all costs with this at the moment because we want that toe pressure. And what our natural inclination will be is to lean back and put that heel on the board with our foot perpendicular to the stringer. But we need to try and resist that. And so it's just going to be popping up, the foot staying nice and parallel with the stringer and touching the toes. So touch the toes, think about that as your cue. And if you feel the heel, then, well, it just came up, but that's pretty good. So touch the toes, and if you feel the heel, then you've done something wrong. That's awesome. I'm going to write that down. Okay, and then once we've done that, so we've done that a few times on land, and we start to get a really, really good idea of how it's feeling. You can also video yourself to make sure it's looking like what we're doing, what I'm showing you here too. But then we want to translate this into the water. Now, the biggest thing that I like to remember when we're in the water, it's quite easy for things to become too erratic in the water, and there's so much going on that we can't focus. So I want you to focus on keeping low and making sure that we filter weight slowly onto the back foot whilst we have the toes engaged and not the heel. So touch the toes, don't feel the heel. And then once we've set our line across the wave, we can then come into our better established stance with our foot perpendicular to the stringer, and we can surf as normal there. That's no problem. If you have any more ideas of things that you'd like to see, please let me know as well. I'm going to be stoked to help out. And if you did find this video useful, then feel free to check out the next video somewhere here, which is the video I did last week, and it's going to be how to improve your cross step. We'll catch you on the next one.